all my injuries came up when I was in that fear state, and I was experiencing a lot of anxiety.
Yep.
And that was sort of when I first started to delve into the mental side of things, and understanding how the mind and the body are so interrelated. And if I want to, get the most out of my body, I'm really going to have to tap into my mind as well.
Welcome to the Get Invested podcast, where we share great conversations with experts from all walks of life to uncover their secret know-how on where they invest their time, their skills and their money, and the benefits that this has created. You see, the truth is that everyone invests. Every minute of every day, we're investing our time, our skills, our energy and our money in something. Some of us are investing consciously, some unconsciously, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, and sometimes for no impact. Get Invested will help you to start living by design, not by default. I'm going to help you to make it happen, not let it happen. You'll hear the top tips on how you can live with conscious intent so that you can live more, work less, and leave a living legacy by investing now. Listen to the show to discover the top tips on how to get started, make the most of your investment journey, and ultimately to be living your dream, not someone else's. More episodes can be found on iTunes or at bushymartin.com.au/get invested. Thanks for listening, and now let's get invested. Welcome, freedom fighters. Today I want to start with a quote. There's no greater tragedy than unrealised potential. So what unrealised potential are you sitting on? What are you not doing that you know that you can, but you just never get around to? I don't want you to get to the end of your life thinking, if only. Well, it's this quote that has motivated the long-term success of today's guest, Luke Schenscher. For those that don't know Luke, he's the 7'1" gentle giant. He's a gangly kid from the Hope Forest area near Wollonga in South Australia who couldn't even catch a ball as a kid, but rose to the giddy heights at the pinnacle of basketball success in the NBA in America, and enjoyed a long 10-year career playing with the likes of the Chicago Bulls, the Portland Trailblazers, and he spent a season with the top-ranked German basketball team, the Brose Baskets. He then returned to Australia to play in the national competition with a number of stints with the likes of the Adelaide 36ers, the Perth Wildcats, and the Townsville Crocs. His accolades include being the first high school player to represent the Boomers, which is the Australian men's national basketball team, and he was the first player in the NBL to record 30 points and 20 rebounds in a game. He was also instrumental in the Perth Wildcats winning the NBL championships. Now, I know what you're all thinking. What a lucky bastard he is. He's had a dream run, he lives the life of Riley, he's just playing sport and having fun. Ha! What a gig. Well, you're going to be very surprised to hear that the reality of his success is a very different story. And he's had to fight tooth and nail and overcome endless challenges both to get to and then remain at the top of the sport. And for me, sport has always been both a metaphor and a microism of life. It's competitive, it's grueling, it's demanding, it's focused on goals, it's defined by rules, and it relies on others to achieve success. And you can also be a hero today, but a zero tomorrow. Now, Luke shares a lot of his lessons and learnings, which we can all apply to all aspects of our lives. So I want you to sit back and enjoy this very open and informative chat with Luke Schenscher. Welcome back, freedom fighters. It's Bushy Martin from the Get Invested podcast. And today I've got the pleasure of spending some time with someone I've had the pleasure of knowing for quite a few years. It's Luke Schenscher. He's an all-star basketballer and well-known both here in Australia and overseas. And I've had the pleasure of assisting Luke with some of his property journey to date. So welcome aboard, Luke. Great to have a chat, mate.
Thanks, Bushy. Good to talk to you.
Mate, a lot of people do know you and you're extremely well known around the country, but for those who don't, can you give us a quick rundown on who you are, what you do and where you're currently heading, mate?
Yeah, well, in a nutshell, I guess I used to play basketball. I'm from Wollonga, a place called Hope Forest in Wollonga Hills, and I played for Southern Tigers down south for my junior basketball, and then I went to Australian Institute of Sport in Canberra for a few years, and then went over and played college basketball in America. Was lucky enough to play professionally in America for a couple of years, and then played in Germany for a little bit, and then been back in Australia and played about 8 years in Australia around the NBL. I've just retired from basketball a couple of years ago. Just at the moment completing my Masters of Education to become a secondary teacher. So that's sort of who I am in a nutshell, I guess.
Yeah, it's given us a really good snapshot on the journey overall. I wouldn't mind sort of drilling in a little bit to go right back. And one of the things I'm keen to understand is what was the motivation and interest in basketball from the outset, and where did that then lead you to, mate?
Yeah, I loved playing all sports when I was a kid. So I played soccer, I played cricket, I played football, basketball, the whole lot. So I was always a keen sports person. My dad played Australian rules football. My mum played netball. So it was kind of in my blood. And, I just sort of, I guess, started as I was getting a bit older. There was kind of come between playing basketball or Australian rules football. And I just seemed to enjoy the basketball side of things a little bit better. Dad always told me, it's like on the football field, it's a big field and there's, 20 odd guys out there that you're with, whereas with basketball there's only 5 on the court.
Yep.
So you got more chance of getting involved.
Yeah.
So I just sort of gravitated more towards basketball. It was just, I was never any good at sport. So I was always obviously very tall. Lucky enough, I was playing for the Southern Tigers in Division 5, actually.
Okay.
That's how bad I was. I couldn't catch the ball. I couldn't really put 2 feet in front of the other without falling over. But I just loved being out there, and I just loved, the whole thing. And, it wasn't until there was a person that coached the SASI team, the South Australian Sports Institute, that was there to watch the Division 1 and 2 players to do some scouting, and he just saw me walk through the door. And I was just this tall, lanky guy, and he's like, who's this guy? And he waited around and watched me play, and he just sort of asked me, what I thought of basketball and where I thought I could go with it. And I just said, look, I'm just playing for a bit of fun.
Yeah.
And then he decided to take me out and do some individual trainings with me. And that was sort of the first point where I actually thought, well, hang on, I could maybe do this for a living, because he told me, you can teach anyone how to play basketball, you can teach them the skills, but you can't teach them to be tall. And he kind of made me realise that I had a unique physical attribute, being tall.
Yeah.
And he kind of instilled in me that idea of if I work hard enough, I'll be able to pick up the skills and I'll be able to pick up all that other stuff, and then use my height to my advantage. So that's kind of where it all started for me with basketball.
Yeah, awesome. So, I mean, for those listeners that don't know, Luke, he's, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you're about 7'1", is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
So, a big, gentle giant, or I think some people call you Big Red, is that right?
Yep, Big Red.
Big Red.
I've got a few nicknames over the years, but
and because what I'd like to just drill into a little bit there, mate, if I can, is that you sort of mentioned that you were never any good to start with, and yes, you obviously must have shot up fairly early. How old were you when the guy actually saw you walk through the door and thought it was worth spending some time with you, mate?
Yeah, I think I would have been about 14 then, I think.
Yep.
Because I worked with him for about a year or two before I went to Australian Institute of Sport.
Yep.
And I was 16 when I went over there to Canberra.
Yeah, because it's not uncommon for someone who, if you have a really sharp growth spurt at that age, the coordination tends to take a while to catch up.
That's right. Yeah.
Would I be right in saying then, mate, that what he helped instill in you is a sense of self-belief? Was that the thing that probably turned the corner in relation to your then passion and determination to do something with the sport?
Yeah, absolutely. It was self-belief, and it was also that idea of if you just work hard enough at something and concentrate on it, that you can get good at it, whatever it is. And it was sort of that idea of I guess at the time I thought, I'm no good at basketball, and I'll just always be bad at basketball, And it was just that idea of if you hone in on it, doesn't matter how bad you are now, if you just keep working, you'll eventually, it'll come together and, you can actually go somewhere with it. So that was sort of the defining moment where I was like, okay, that makes sense. Let me see where I can go with this.
Yeah.
And it was, just that hard work and that dedication that, I realized I needed to implement if I wanted to make something of it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm a fairly formative age for that seed to be sown in terms of, right, okay, I get this now. I mightn't be too good now, but it's just a matter of really putting in the hard yards to get better every day. So that got you to the Institute of Sport. Let's sort of continue the journey from there, mate. So what was where did it lead to from that point?
Yeah, well, I guess on top of that too, just to go back real quick, the other thing that also helped me too was having someone to look up to, and someone that's sort of done it before. And for me, it was Luke Longley, which a lot of basketball fans would know. He played for Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan and won the championships there with him. And he was a big kid, redhead as well. And he was very similar to me as far as being a really tall, skinny kid when he was younger and not being very good and being a bit uncoordinated. And he sort of was someone that had gone through that journey, and this coach kind of pointed him out to me as well, and said that I reminded him of Luke Longley when he was a kid. So, having that as well, having that someone to look up to and someone that's been there and done that, also helped me. And that's the same thing going to the Australian Institute of Sport. So I went there, and I felt like I didn't deserve to be there because I was with, the top Australian junior athletes in Australia.
Yeah.
And here I was, I could hardly catch a ball and, just learning how to shoot and all that sort of stuff. And I definitely felt like I shouldn't have been there. But it was the greatest, for my personal life and my basketball career, it was the greatest 3 years of my life in that respect, that I learned to play basketball. I learned how to get a top work ethic. I learned, so many different things. I learned how to eat right. I learned, so many, the whole strength conditioning side of things. Started to touch on the mental side of things a little bit. We had a psychologist there.
Yeah.
Top medicos with the physios and masseuse, and really was a great foundation and springboard for the rest of my career.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, it sounds like it was touching on all of those aspects, the mental, the physical, the health, the whole gambit in that regard. And were there any other key lessons that you took from that time, given how formative it was in relation to the rest of your career?
I think it was a bit of a, I guess, confirmation of that idea of if you work hard at something and dedicate yourself to something, the sky's the limit on how good you can be. And the improvements that I made over the 3 years of Australian Institute of Sport was just, I couldn't have fathomed the improvements that I made going in there. So it was just that idea of, because my body I was extremely thin. I mean, when I first went in there, I still got the results of my first physical screening, and I was 6'11" and weighed 78 kilos.
Wow.
So, that was the frame I was working with. And, I put on about 20 kilos when I was at the Australian Institute of Sport.
Yep.
And it just made me realise that, for me to get to the level, just to get to the level that everyone else was there, I had to work twice as hard just to be at their level.
Yep.
So I realised, I can't just do what everyone else is doing.
Yep.
Because, I'm just not naturally at that level, so I'm going to have to do extra just to get to their level. And that's sort of something I learnt there as well. And that kind of held me in good stead throughout my career, of just understanding that just doing the basics isn't enough. I'm going to have to do extra.
Yeah.
If I want to make the most of it.
Yeah, awesome. So that work ethic and the, I've heard that old saying that, if you just focus on being 1% better every day, then you're 356% better at the end of the year. And
Right.
Taking that sort of long-term approach to just slowly but gradually polishing.
Yep.
Was that your experience then, as you went from someone who I don't think I'm very good to someone who probably recognised your potential far more than you did, clearly, but help instill that sense of belief, and then created an opportunity for you to go down that road? Was that pretty much how it went for you?
Yeah, for sure. I think it was that time at the RAS was definitely the realisation that these coaches, and especially this one coach that pulled me aside when I was younger, said I had this potential, and it was the first time I realised that I actually believed them. I was like, oh
Yes.
shit, okay, here we go. I'm actually, they're not just talking. That they actually mean what they're saying. So
Yeah, awesome, mate. So, went through the ringer at the Institute of Sport. Where did that then lead to, and just take us through what opportunities came up? Why did you make the ones that you did, and what was the both the motivation and the outcome from there?
Yeah, so from there I got recruited by a few colleges in America. So at the time, I was sort of wanted to follow the same path as what Luke Longley did. He went to college in America, and that allowed him to be seen by other NBA teams and that over there. So it kind of gave him good exposure. And back then, this was before Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and all that stuff. So if you were in front of the guys over there, they didn't really know about you overseas.
Yeah, of course.
So I always had it in my head that I wanted to go to college. And it was something that, I spoke to Phil Smythe, who was the coach of the 36ers at the time.
Yep.
And, he was sort of asking me if I wanted to play in with the 36ers and, have a sort of a development role there. And, we sat down and we sort of said, well, with the rules in college, if you go over to college, if you play professionally anywhere else in the world, you are ineligible to go to college.
Right.
So if I had to sign with the 36ers, that automatically made me ineligible to ever go to college.
Is that right?
So the consensus was, sitting down with Phil Smythe, was like, well, if you just go over there at least for a year and just see what it's like, check it out, you get the experience, you get to go to American college.
Yeah.
Get to experience the movies where they're in the frat houses doing the frat parties. And also, I guess, train doing some basketball as well. But, it was, so that was sort of the consensus. Go over there for a year. You might as well try it out. You can always come back to Australia and play at any time.
Yeah.
But you only get one chance to give it a go in college. So, I decided to give college a go, and I got recruited by a few schools. And at the end of the day, it just came down to a school that played in one of the top leagues in America.
Yeah.
So they played against Duke, North Carolina, where Michael Jordan played. Duke are always the top 10 teams in the country every year.
Yeah.
It's a very high level league. And there was another college that was in a sort of a lower level league. And the consensus was, if I went to that lower level league, I'd probably get more minutes to begin with and play, a bigger role. Whereas if I went to the bigger school, I might get lost in the system, and it's a big risk. So it was a big decision. But I ended up choosing the school that was in the higher league.
Okay. So that was Georgia Tech?
That's Georgia Tech, yeah.
Gotcha.
In Atlanta.
Who was, because that fairly pivotal position and decision right there, is that something that you made on your own, or who else was helping you in making that critical choice? Yeah,
so I consulted pretty much between the coaches at the Australian Institute of Sport.
Yeah.
My parents, and I actually spoke to Luke Longley as well.
Awesome.
So yeah, he was happy to have a chat, and he's actually always been happy to have a chat over the years. And
sensational.
Yeah, which has always been great. And yeah, the consensus came down to talking to my coaches at the AIS and my parents, and just reflecting on it myself. I figured, this is a chance for me to prove myself against the best. The best players in the country,
in the world, really,
and well, in the world at that level, for sure. So I thought, well, I wanted to do that.
Brilliant.
So that was kind of what it came down to, and also, I felt like the coach was pretty down to earth and pretty straightforward, and they had amazing facilities there. They've got a lot of money that they can put into the program. So that's what I decided to do.
Awesome. And just on Luke Longley, because he's, as you say, a bit of a hallowed guru in the whole sphere of basketball. Did you reach out to him to make that contact, or did he hear about you? Was it something? Talk me about that.
I'm pretty sure it was the coach at the Australian Institute of Sport. I think he reached out to Luke and just said, "Hey, there's this young kid that's looking to go to college and looking to go down the same route as you did, and do you mind talking to him?" And he was great. Talked to him about that. I talked to him when I was left college and I was looking, to get an agent and looking to do different stuff, and he's always been happy to have a chat. And also when I was playing at the Perth Wildcats, he came out and gave up his time to work me out a lot of the times. And
really,
so he's always been very open and very good at giving me his time and always wanted to help me out.
You must have been pinching yourself at the time, given he was your ultimate role model when that first conversation was had. You must have been really feeling like you'd were doing something that very few people get the opportunity to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I was scared. Yeah, I was just didn't know what to say really. I was just giving him a lot of yeses, and so it was great. And he also spoke to my parents, and they really appreciated that too. So
awesome.
Yeah, it was just awesome.
Pretty humble character by the sounds, is he?
Yeah, absolutely.
Bit like yourself, mate. Yeah.
Well.
Mate, so that led to the Fort Worth Flyers opportunity. Is that what came next?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, essentially, yeah. So I was at college, and my first 2 years I didn't play much, and pretty much what happened, what a lot of people said would happen, that I'd get lost in the system, and there are other players that were playing in front of me, and I actually decided that I was going to come back to Australia after my second year.
Okay.
My mind was made up.
Yeah.
And then I actually had a conversation with the coach of the Australian Institute of Sport.
Yeah.
And he pretty much said, just give yourself one more year. He said you can always come back. He kind of gave me that talk.
Yeah.
And I decided to stick around just for one more year.
Okay.
Decided that I was just going to, give it my all that off season and just work out every day and do what I can and just have no regrets. If I ended up, not playing, then I did all I could, and I'll come back to Australia.
Okay.
But it just so happened in that off season that one of the guys got drafted to the NBA.
Yeah.
A guy named Chris Bosh.
Yeah.
Another guy transferred to another college, and the other big guy blew his knee out in the preseason, and I was the last guy left.
Right.
Last big guy left.
Okay.
And so the coach had to play me.
Yeah.
And I'd done all that work in the off season leading up to it, and ended up playing really well. And we actually went to the national championship that season.
Nice.
So I went from not playing at all and wanting to leave to being the starting centre for the national championship team the next year.
Nice.
So,
awesome.
It was a massive swing.
Yeah.
I'm always thankful for that coach that made me stay around for an extra year.
Yep.
So from there, ended up, getting a few NBA tryouts and went through all that stuff and got some good feedback on what I need to work on, what I need to do.
Yep.
Ended up playing in the development league for the Fort Worth Flyers.
Yep.
So that's sort of the league. It's kind of like the SANFL to the AFL.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's kind of like a feeder league to the NBA. And then if, players are injured or they're not getting much playing time in the NBA, they can come back and play in the development league to
game time.
Get their fitness up and game time and that type of thing.
You were ranked in the top 50 players for points per game and top 20 rebounds per game, I think, at that time too. Is that right?
Yeah, something like that. I'm not sure of the actual stats, but it was an interesting time in that league. Everyone in that league doesn't want to be there, so they're all
they're either on the way up or the way down, are they?
Exactly. They all want to get to the NBA. Even the coaches, the administration, everyone wants to get out. So everyone's just there for themselves.
Okay.
And everyone believes that they shouldn't be there. Everyone's got a story about how they've been hard done by and how they deserve to be in the NBA, and it's not fair that they're there. And so that was a really, really tough time, actually. Just there was no money in it, so we were training at a high school gym. We had to go there at lunchtime to train, and we had to I had to buy my own gym membership at the local place and get myself to and from there to work out. And it was a tough time. It wasn't easy at all.
Really, real dog eat dog type of environment by the sounds of things.
Yeah, you got your own players. You're doing what they can to show off in front of the scouts, and that's why I think my rebounds were so good, because it was the only way I got the ball. Because no one would pass the ball in that league. They all wanted to score themselves. So.
Silver lining to that cloud there.
Yeah, exactly.
And that then led to the first 10-day contract with the Chicago Bulls. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. So from that league, you can get called up to the NBA, to any team in the NBA. Yeah.
And the rules are that they call you up for a 10-day contract.
Yeah.
And then after the 10 days, they get rid of you, or they can sign you on for a second 10-day contract.
Wow.
And then after the second one, they either have to get rid of you or sign you for the rest of the year.
Massive pressure, mate. Massive pressure.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yep, absolutely.
How did you? Because I think every one of us hits periods in our life where what we do at a point in time can potentially have massive impacts on the future. What was your mindset, and how did you get yourself through that very challenging time? Because a lot of people would crumble under that sort of pressure. Can you sort of talk us through your thinking and actions at that time that sort of helped you to get to the next level?
Yeah, I think one of the things that actually helped me was the fact that I didn't have a lot of time to think about it. I didn't have enough time to psych myself out.
Right.
So
Good call.
I ended up we were playing a game in, I think it was Idaho somewhere for the in the D League, and after the game I got a call from an agent saying we've got a flight out the next day for you to fly into Cleveland and meet up with the team.
Right.
And, to play for Chicago.
Wow.
So I had to race we got back on the bus back to Fort Worth, wherever it was, and I had to get all my stuff and just get the hell out of there.
Yep.
And then before I knew it, click of the fingers, and I'm sitting in the locker room putting on a Chicago Bulls singlet. And it was sort of a case of a lot of times, a lot of players, when they get called up for the 10-day contract, they won't get to play at all. Because they're just there as a backup in case someone goes down, or they've had someone who's a bit not sure about when they're going to come back from injury, so they want someone there as insurance.
Right.
And a lot of times people won't get to play at all. So my first game, when I met up with them in Cleveland, I didn't expect to play at all. There's not too many, because I hadn't trained with the team, hadn't done anything yet. And then in the second quarter, I was sitting on the bench, and the coach yelled out my name and told me to get in the game. So, I really, really hadn't thought about the fact that I was going to be in the game.
Yeah.
Ended up, playing pretty well and having a good run. And then I guess, I sort of had that feeling of I'm just enjoying the moment.
Yes.
For those first 10 days,
it
was just enjoying the moment and just being appreciative for being there.
Great.
which I think helped. So I was just, I think, and that kind of rubbed off on the coaches and the players too, because they saw how appreciative I was of being there, and they saw that, I was really excited and just enjoying my time. And I think when you're enjoying yourself, it rubs off on other people. And that was sort of the mindset I had at the time.
So is that something that you just did naturally again? Because it's, when you're coming from a place of gratitude and a place of opportunity versus a place of fear, which, a lot of people were put in that situation will be operating from fear because it's like, if I don't do my best, I'm not going to get there. So was that sort of getting into that zone of I'm just going to enjoy this moment? Was that just something that came naturally or where did it come from?
It definitely was something that came naturally, because there has been times later on in my career where I've actually been the opposite way.
Okay.
When it's sort of been that case of, I've never experienced playing in the NBA. I hadn't been there yet. It was sort of this whole thing of just enjoying being there, enjoying the moment. But then on the other side of that, once I had that experience and once I'd done that and I came out of that situation, going back to other situations, I sort of had that pressure on myself that, I have been at that level, so, I need to perform at this level, and it actually kind of turned around and had a negative effect, and that's sort of something that I got into later on in my career, was the whole mental side of things and trying to tap into that positive mindset and that idea of being appreciative of where I am and taking that pressure off myself and that type of thing. So it just happened naturally for me at that time. Yeah,
well, so just so that we can get a sense and a feel of the contrast then, just sort of talk us through a time later on when that fear did kick in and the impact it had, and then we'll talk about when you started to recognise the importance of your mental outlook and what you did with who to steady the course later on. Can you just talk us through a couple of good examples of that, please, mate?
Yeah, I guess there's plenty of examples of that, but I guess the one that comes into mind would be, so after my 2 stints in the NBA, I signed with a team in Germany. Yep. And I'd actually signed, I think it was the biggest contract that they'd ever signed anyone for.
Is that right?
And so to me, going in there, I didn't realise at the time, but going in there, as soon as I got there and people were talking about it, and it put a lot of pressure on. I put a lot of pressure on myself about, that I have to really perform here and I have to be doing really well. And I actually went in with a bit of a knee niggle.
Right.
I had a knee injury.
Yep.
And it just that pressure I was putting on myself. Also being in another country that doesn't speak the language, and
of course,
just first time really experiencing that. I really kind of did delve into a fear mindset. And it was kind of, the knee thing was making me feel like, I'm not good enough. And then I had the whole, big contract that they signed me for. And then, I played in the NBA, so, I'm an NBA player, and all these sort of thoughts just added to that pressure. And then that anxiety that I was feeding myself, ended up going back into the knee because I was being tense and I couldn't relax, and ended up, pushing myself more, when my body's all tight. Yeah. And, my knee got worse and worse, and, couldn't really figure out what was going on with my knee, and went to a lot of specialists, and, it got to the point where I couldn't hardly walk on it. So I ended up coming back to Australia.
Okay.
And getting tests done, and then I realised I needed to get surgery on it. So the team released me in Germany.
Yeah.
And I ended up coming back to Australia and getting some surgery and rehab on my knee. But that was the first time I started to look at, one, I realised how much my anxiety and fear was causing me physical issues.
Yeah.
And not helping me heal with my knee.
Yeah.
Then I look back over the years at all my injuries, and really all my injuries came up when I was in that fear state, and I was experiencing a lot of anxiety.
Yep.
And that was sort of when I first started to delve into the mental side of things and understanding how the mind and the body are so interrelated. And if I want to, get the most out of my body, I'm really going to have to tap into my mind as well.
Yeah, now, awesome, mate. A great recognition because, most of us tend to just focus on the physical, and what you're talking about really hits a tune with me because, as we were talking about earlier, I'm a long-term field hockey player, and I've had lots of years of issues with hamstrings because that's with bending over playing hockey, that's the issue. And what turned the corner for me was seeing a physio in Wollonga where you spent a lot of your early years, and he got me to realise that all my issues were in my head. And because I was anxious about it, it was creating stiffness and tightness and all the way through the body. And he got me into meditation and a whole bunch of other things with some other strengthening, endurance and flexibility things, obviously. But the major driver of all that was the mental state. So that was a bit of a light bulb moment for me. How did that moment come around? Was that someone that saw that and opened your eyes to it, or was that something you found by yourself?
Yeah, it was a bit of both. I mean, I had a very similar story to you, actually. And also just want to say congratulations on still playing at a level that you're playing at. It's amazing what you're doing. I'm 36 right now, and I can't even walk up and down a court, let alone get out on a hockey field. So that's great.
Yeah, thanks, mate. It's a daily challenge, Luke. Let me tell you, there's a lot of work goes into getting there. But I just love the camaraderie and with the boys, and there's nothing better than doing something physical to really cleanse the mind and enjoy life, mate. So, yeah, no, thanks, mate. But, go on with your story. I'm very interested.
Yeah, so mine is actually very similar to yours. There's a physio here in Adelaide who I started seeing, who I was recommended by a few other people. And we started working to rehab my knee. We started working on just the physical. But he was starting to get into, he realised as a physio that treating the physical stuff was just treating the symptoms and not necessarily the cause.
Yeah.
And so he started to delve into a lot of that mind-body connection. And so we did a lot of work around understanding where I'm holding tension in my body and what actually it is that's causing that tension to be held and how I can release that.
Yeah.
And, he explained it to me, which really made sense to me. And I explained it to other people when they think that it's a bit of, a bit of woo-woo stuff going on. But, you look at what happens when people are stressed. They get headaches, they get tight necks, they get, sore shoulders, and it's the exact same thing. Yeah. They're holding tension in their heads and their neck.
Yeah.
And that's very common. Everyone knows that that's what happens. Yeah. So it's no different. Why would it be just in your neck and shoulders? It's all over your body that you can hold this tension.
Exactly.
And it's you can delve pretty deep into it, but basically that's what it comes down to. So
talk us through some of the techniques that led to mental, physical, other things that and habits and practices that you then develop, because what you're talking about now can be applied to pretty much any situation, really. And I think it'd be really useful for the listeners to pick up on the processes and some of the things that you implemented then that enabled you to overcome it and extend your career for so long.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that came up for me was to understand how much I was putting all my eggs in one basket. So with that self-realisation, I realised I was putting all my self-worth into my performance on the basketball court.
Right.
So if I had a really good game, then I was the greatest person in the world and I was on top of the world and how good am I? Yeah. But if I had a bad game, then automatically I'm worthless. I'm a piece of crap. I'm the worst player in the world. I've let myself down. I've let my coaches down. I've let my teammates down. I've let my family down. Yeah. It was that real, all my eggs in that one basket, and it wasn't healthy. It was that idea of understanding that, my self-worth doesn't come from my performance on the basketball court. It comes from a whole range of things. And it was really working on that resilience, I guess, of self-worth, regardless of outside circumstances.
Yep.
So, doing that, it was about meditation really was the number one thing for me. And that can mean a whole range of different things. There's different types of meditations, and the first one was just quietening my body and my mind, and actually going into my body and starting to feel where I was holding tension.
Yeah, okay.
It's such a simple technique, and when I was doing it, I didn't realise how easy it was, and I felt like, I'm just making this up in my head. It was just that simple to do. Yeah. But it was very profound, and I realised, I'm holding on to tension in my knee because I'm afraid of this happening or that happening, and what I need to do now is release that tension by kicking a football or doing something to release that energy. Yeah, awesome. And then work on that story that is creating that tension in the first place, and reframe that story and go from there. So
that's awesome, mate. Yeah, awesome. And I agree with you. There's 1,001 definitions of meditation, from everything from sitting on a hillside with your palms facing the sun to just taking 5 minutes to close your eyes and focus on the breathing. What you've just mentioned there is a sensational, and anyone could do that actually if they take the time to listen to what their body's telling them.
That's right. Yeah.
Are there other things that you then added to that repertoire that assisted you with all of that, mate?
Yeah, so I ended up getting into. I have a friend actually down at Wollonga as well who is an acupuncturist and traditional Chinese medicine. He's done his studies in. So I did some work with him and did a lot of Qigong, which is like a type of Tai Chi. Yep. Which is sort of about just kind of moving the body and building up the strength in the tendons, and it's a really good art form. It's kind of like a moving meditation.
I like it.
So I did some work with that. And I also got into a type of meditation called Vipassana, which is a 10-day meditation course that you go on. Yep. You head out to this course and you spend 10 days where you don't speak. Yep. You meditate for ends up being about 10 or 11 hours a day. Wow. On and off. And that was sort of the first time that I'd actually I'd read a lot of books on meditation, and I read a lot of books on, sort of that Zen state and, all that sort of stuff that I strive for. And then I've had a few times playing basketball that I wanted to try and, tap into every time I stepped on the court. Yep. But at those retreats, it was the first time I actually experienced it. Awesome. So that was pretty profound for me as well. So, that helped kind of solidify my meditation practice as well.
Gotcha. What was that called again?
To another level. It's called Vipassana.
Okay, sounds really interesting, mate. It's something I'm pretty keen to look into because
I recommend it. It's full on, but it's something that really allows you to experience all the stuff that those books talk about. Yeah, you actually experience it. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, it sounds awesome, mate. So, some pretty big learnings along that journey then, and I can't even imagine what it must have been like to go to Germany. I mean, with a name like Schenscher, you've probably got some German heritage in there somewhere, but to go into a foreign country, pretty much foreign language, in a fairly high pressure situation, I think anyone would be challenged by that, mate. So, but I guess that. Again, one of the questions that sits in my mind is that you're, at a very young age, happy to jump on a plane and go to the States. So you're pretty much on your own at a very formative age. Then you're happy to jump on another plane and go to a completely foreign country. Where does that sort of that courage? Because there's a lack of fear in what I'm hearing there, mate. In terms of I'm going to do what I need to do. Is that just something that comes naturally to you, or is it you've had mentors that have encouraged you along that road?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know. I look back and you might say courage, and I sort of think stupidity because some of the stuff I did, you know, I think if I was in any sort of sane right mind, there's no way I would have done it. You know, leaving home at 16, and I still remember my parents dropped me off at the AIS that night and walking out, and I was just bawling, crying.
Yeah.
Not knowing, you know, anyone there, what I was doing, why I was there.
Yeah.
Gutsy. Yeah, it was just, if I was, for some reason I did it, you know, for some reason I stayed there, and even, you know, in college when I was over there and things weren't going well, and I guess, you know, I had that coach to kind of reassure me, but at the same time, yeah, I think looking back, why did I put myself through all that? I'm not quite sure.
Yeah. Is it because you had a very compelling vision of what you wanted to achieve, and that gave you the strength to do whatever you had to do to try and get there?
Yeah, I think I think that's a good point. Like, I think, you know, going right back to that first coach that saw me when I was playing in Division 5, and he kind of instilled that idea of, if you just work hard enough, you'll get there.
Yeah. And
I guess that really stuck with me. I guess it was that idea of, no matter how hard it is, or, you know, how horrible you're feeling at the moment, if you just keep working, you'll get there.
Yeah.
And that's sort of, I guess, what stuck with me, and that's sort of what I always had, no matter how bad it was. It was that case of, no, I just got to keep working and it will sort itself out.
Yeah, love it, mate. Now, I guess the other thing that, again, just sort of doing a bit of homework on your history, you came back to Australia from and I won't get the pronunciation right, but is it the Bros Baskets? Is that the German team?
That's right, in Bamberg in Germany. Yep.
Bamberg? Oh, awesome. I'm going there in about a month's time. So,
mate, you'll love it. It's got the highest amount of breweries for any town per capita in Europe, I think.
Is that right? Look out.
Yeah.
It's going to be dangerous.
They have smoked beer is their specialty, so you have to try one of those.
I'll definitely have one of those, mate. I'll think of you when I'm doing Prost.
I love
it. Mate, what I guess I find really interesting from there is that you came back to Australia and you spent the best part of a decade at the highest level in basketball here in the country. But along that journey, there was clearly some twists and turns, because you went from the 36ers to the Eastern Mavericks to the Perth Wildcats to the Townsville Crocs, and back to the 36ers, then back to Townsville. What I'm taking from that is that, yes, you're at the highest level, but there's not a second you can take that for granted. That things can turn on a dime, and you've got to continue, obviously, to work extremely hard to be able to maintain your presence at that area. Can you talk us through a little bit of that, mate, and the trials and tribulations, and how you managed to stay playing at that level for so long?
Yeah, there was definitely lots of trials and tribulations. I mean, I guess when I first came back to Australia, I was doing my rehab on my knee, and I decided that I wanted to spend at least a year playing in Australia just to get back to, a level where I was before I had my knee surgery and that.
Yeah.
So I signed with the 36ers, and personally had a great year. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I was playing, in front of my family back in Adelaide.
Awesome.
Really enjoying myself. It was actually a really great year.
Yeah.
And then after that, because I played well, I got asked to try out with the LA Lakers for the summer league.
Okay.
In the off season.
Yep.
So I went over to America and to prepare for that tryout, I went back to my old college in Atlanta at Georgia Tech to work out and get ready.
Yep.
And a week before tryouts, I ended up blowing my back out.
Oh.
So I was in bed for about a week and a half, where I just couldn't get out of bed. It was the most excruciating pain I've ever been in my life. Ended up I had to get a epidural injection just to be able to move again, and it was pretty rough. But at that point, the 36ers had already signed all their players, so
of course.
I was left where I couldn't train for a couple of months, just to get my back rehab.
Yeah.
But then I ended up, getting a gig in Perth, because they were looking for a big guy.
Yeah.
So it just happened to work out that I went to Perth, and that was a good year. We ended up winning the grand final. So won the NBL championship.
Awesome.
Which was really good. And then, I ended up, talking to the coach about coming back, and, they were sort of about 50-50 on whether they wanted me to come back or not.
Okay.
And yeah, it was sort of like one of those times where, I'm kind of like, well, we won the championship.
Yeah.
I don't know what else.
What else can you do? Yeah.
What else can you do? But it was sort of a case of, there's a few things involved, but the coach in Townsville called me up, and he was really keen on getting me out there, and I really liked what he had to say about the team and where they're looking to go, and the fit that I would have, and I got really excited about that, so I signed with Townsville. Yeah. I played there for 2 years, and my first year played really well. We ended up were minor premiers, then we lost in the finals, I think. The first year, and then the second year, I ended up having hip surgery.
Okay.
So that set me back a little bit. But then played about half the year, and then the opportunity came up in Adelaide. It was a 3-year contract to come back to Adelaide, and it was just something that I couldn't really turn down. They just signed a new coach, and it was looking like it was a really good situation to come back to, and so I jumped all over that and came back to Adelaide. And played 3 years there, but really since I had that hip surgery, I never really got back to where I was before that hip surgery.
Okay.
So that was something that was always tough. So I was constantly trying to get back to that level I was before the hip surgery. And I ended up breaking my back in one game. I think it was my second year with the 36ers, which wasn't ideal.
My God.
It was just a case of like these injuries started popping up, and they just sort of started to take a bit longer to get over, and then never really fully would get over them, and it just sort of felt like that body was starting to decline, and I just was spending a lot more time doing the rehab, a lot more time doing all this alternative stuff to try and keep the body as fresh as possible, and it was got to the point where my body really was just breaking down. So I had an off season off, and then I spoke to a new coach that was up in Townsville, and he was building, had a whole bunch of new guys coming in, young guys, and he just wanted an older head to come in and kind of, just sort of show the guys the ropes, and have an older head to be around the guys. So he asked me to come up. Ended up playing up in Townsville again to finish off my career.
Yeah, awesome. And I think they got into some financial strife there at one stage, didn't they?
So I had one more year on the contract, but they ended up going bankrupt. So they folded and were out of the league, and I was already planning on retiring anyway. So I decided that was it for me as well.
Yeah, I remember you and I met around 2015, and I think one of our early conversations about the future, you were talking about that you're coming to the end of the career and you wanted to get back to teaching and take it from there. And it sounds like that's exactly the route you've taken, and you've sort of completely hung up the boots now, mate, from basketball, or you still have an ongoing involvement?
Yeah, I was playing a bit of 3-on-3, which is a new style of basketball that's starting out. And that was good for a bit there because it's only half court. So I didn't have to get my old body up and down the full court. But then I soon realised that it was a quick game. And it's just constant the whole time. And in the tournaments, you play sort of 5 or 6 games in one day.
Wow.
So it was really hard for me to back up that many games in one day. So it'd take me about a week to recover after a tournament. So I've given that away now as well. And I'm just doing some skills coaching and and a few coaching gigs here and there just to stay in the game a little bit.
Yeah.
While I'm doing finishing off my masters. So.
Yeah, awesome, mate. So if I look back, and that's a long career, mate, from pretty much 15 to 35. That's a 20-year career in top-level sport. What are the lessons that, you've shared a lot of them already, but the take-home messages for you over that journey that are going to be fundamental to your future?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's that whole thing of there's a few things that kind of got me through, but there's also those same things that caused a lot of anxiety for me as well. So reflecting on my career, the one thing that got me through was just having that goal and that determination. Yeah. And that like we spoke about a few times, just that idea of if I work hard enough, I'll get there. Yeah. And, that's something that I'll take into, my next part of my life. But at the same time, I've reflected on it a lot, and I'm sort of starting to refrain, because what happened was I was so focused and so determined to get to a goal that if I was going in a direction where I felt like was the wrong direction or wasn't towards my goal, it would cause me a lot of anxiety, and I would, freak out and have to try and pull myself back onto what I thought was the right track. Okay. Whereas, looking back now, it might have actually led to another opportunity that would have got me to that goal anyway. Okay. And, my goal wasn't just to play in the NBA, it was to play in the NBA for 10 years. Yes. 10 plus years, and I only played there for 2. So, right. Looking back now, is that case of, well, I likened it to the analogy of a river. And, the river goal is to get to the ocean. Yeah. But a lot of the times it will actually cut back on itself. Yeah. It might head into a rock and have to go around the rock. But if it, sort of thought at that moment, I'm heading back up towards the mountain. Yeah. I've got to push myself back down. It can get in strife. So it's allowing that, a bit more of a free flowing, kind of mentality of I have an intention and I have where I want to get to. Yeah. And I have like sort of steps on how to get there, but at the same time, I don't have to be so caught up in analysing every second of where I'm at and controlling every moment.
Yes, yeah, that's a really good insight, mate. Because I'm a bit similar. I'm very, very goal focused and tend to be quite controlling. And same thing. The times when I probably had the greatest success is when I have allowed the flow. Because it is a flow, there's no doubt, and sort of gone with it, still focusing on the goal, but not sort of, if it's not going the way I thought it was going to go, then force the exercise to get back on track and then you're working hard against certain things at a period of time. That's a really good insight, mate. Actually, and a great analogy. The river analogy is a good one. I'd use a similar one. It's like sailing a yacht towards the horizon. You know where you want to get to, but you can't foresee what the winds, the water, the currents, and everything else are going to do. So you need to be able to tack and trim and change so that you're working with the elements that will still ultimately get you where you want to without necessarily going in a straight line.
Exactly right. That's it.
Yeah, that's great learnings, mate. So let's talk about the future then, and I'd share with us if you can what your perfect lifestyle looks like in the future, and what are you doing with who, where, when, what's your perfect day, week, month, year look like, and just describe that to us if you can, mate.
Yeah, I guess that overall intention is to be in a spot where, I'm financially comfortable. That need is met. I guess when you're not worried about things like finance or food or shelter, that Maslow's hierarchy of needs type thing, you actually have that, that space where you can, worry about other things. And for me, it's about, I look at what I want to do now that I've finished playing basketball. I feel like I've had, a unique life. and I feel like it would be a shame if the stuff that I've been through, if I don't use that to help others that are going through similar things, or the whole idea of I think it's a shame if people go through their lives with all these experiences, but then don't allow themselves to give back to the younger generation, so that hopefully maybe they can do more than what you've done.
Yes,
and that's sort of, I guess, the way I see things is, what's the point of going through all these experiences if humanity in general doesn't gain from them?
Yeah.
So my idea is to be able to kind of, to give back my experiences, and hopefully, other people can maybe, not spend as long as I did getting caught up in the wrong things, or, I can prepare them for certain situations so they can get over things quicker and move to a higher level than what I got to. And that's sort of an intention, I guess.
Yeah, that's awesome, mate. That's awesome. And the gap between where you are now and where you want to be in that position where you're financially comfortable and can give back, because you've got a wealth of knowledge and expertise, and beyond the physics of the game, all of the stuff that you and I have spoken about in relation to your thinking and your outlook, and the importance of mentors along that road, which you've clearly enunciated. What are you going to invest in between now and then to help support you financially be able to do that?
Yeah, well, I guess financially speaking, I've invested in property, and that's, what I've come to you for, and that's how we met.
Yeah.
And that's what you're helping me through.
Yeah.
And then also, with this degree that I'm getting, my teaching degree, that'll hopefully turn into a teaching contract.
Yeah.
Which will allow me to, get a salary and work on that. And then, the plan is to do some more property investment, through you, which we've talked about.
Yeah.
That's sort of the financial side of things.
Yeah. Yeah, no, awesome, mate. Well, it gives us a very clear picture around that. Now, given what we've been talking about, I'm a bit tongue-tied here, how important is a team approach to your success, do you think?
A team approach?
Yeah.
Yeah, massively. I mean, for me, obviously, I've been in a team for my whole career.
Yeah.
That taking that out into the world outside of sport now, looking at all the stuff that I want to do, and it's a real simple example is, I've obviously grew up in the Fleurieu region, and I'm back in the Fleurieu region right now, and I wanted to be able to do something here with the basketball side of things for a while.
Awesome.
But I just sort of haven't really been in the right frame of mind and haven't been organised enough. And it sort of hasn't really happened. But then I ended up talking to a friend of mine who runs a business of running basketball clinics.
Okay.
And there's a lady that organises them for him, and so I ended up getting in touch with her, and she's organised for me to do these clinics down in Victor Harbour.
Brilliant.
So just that fact of like reaching out and getting someone to help me in an area that I'm not very good at, to allow me to, do something that I want to do, is very important. And the more I do that, and it's sort of lowering that ego as well. Because there's part of that ego that says, no, I can do it myself, and I want to do it, say that I've done it, and it's all me. And it's lowering that ego to say, no, if I want to make the most of this, then I need help. And you can get so much more done when you have help with people that are experts in their certain area that you are not. So that's been a big lesson for sure. Yeah,
no, great insight there, mate. All right, I'm going to move into what I call the ambush, or the bushfire lightning round now, mate, where we go through some quick questions on things that the listeners are pretty keen to learn from you. So, kicking it off, what's your favourite quote and why?
My favourite quote. Well, I know the quote that I used, that I actually picked up when I was at the Australian Institute of Sport, that I used through my career.
Yep.
Was that there's nothing more common than unfulfilled potential.
Yes.
And that's something that stuck with me throughout my career.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a cracker. Yeah, that's a great motivator. And your own story of moving from someone who internally felt that you couldn't even hold a basketball to playing at the highest level through your own work ethic, dedication, discipline, patience, persistence, and then ability, because you're focused on the end goal, to work through physical injury and some pretty serious injuries there, mate. Knees, hips, broken backs. I mean, that's a pretty amazing level of dedication. I take my hat off to you. And I can see where that quote would fit squarely in the centre of that, mate. So that's a cracker. What about the top book and or podcast that you'd recommend people either read or listen to, and why?
Yeah, I think top book would probably be, it's called A New Earth. By a guy named Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah, it's a cracker.
It's a pretty popular book these days, but for me, that was the one book that kind of got me into, I guess, when people spoke about mind-body stuff and spirituality and all that, I thought it was a bit of woo-woo. But I read that book, and it was one that made me realise, hang on, all the stuff he's talking about is actually common sense.
Yeah.
I was like, this is just common sense. Like, how is this not a thing?
I agree.
And it's very basic. It's sort of an entry level type book. But it was the one thing that made me kind of click and go, okay, there is something in this. And it was the start of going further into it. Yeah,
I read that and listened to it. I got it on Audible as well, and he's in his own voice, and he's got that really slow, patient sort of exercise, which actually slows you down when you listen to him, and sort of living in the moment and embracing time as your friend rather than your foe. I think there's a lot of us in this current day and age that without realising it, treat time as the enemy, because it's all got to happen straight away. It's all got to happen instantly. Whereas if we relax with it and treat time as the friend that's going to help us get there, suddenly we can start enjoying the journey rather than fighting it every second of the day.
Absolutely.
So, no, that's a cracker. What about the... now, this is a bit left field, but it's something that I constantly get people talking about, and I guess it's because a lot of Australians pay a lot of tax. What's the top thing that you've done to pay less tax, Luke?
Get a good accountant.
Yeah, that's a cracker. You're dead right there. That's absolutely...
It's as simple as that
for me. Yeah, that's...
Like I said, to me, I'm not an expert in that area, so I reach out and get an expert in that area. And that's helped me a lot, for sure.
Crackerjack. Yeah, no, that's absolutely spot on. Now, coming back to the investment side of the equation, what's both the worst and the best piece of investment advice that you've ever received?
Investment advice. I guess, the best investment advice I ever got is it goes back to the whole thing, seek out people that are experienced in that field.
Yeah.
For me, I was making this money with basketball. I knew it wasn't going to be forever.
Yeah.
When I was in America, I wasn't getting superannuation.
Yeah.
There were a few teams in Australia that I won't mention where superannuation wasn't paid.
Wow.
So there was sort of this extra sort of level of I didn't have that backup that most Australians have.
Yeah.
And so I started looking at the investment side of things, and I spoke to a guy who doesn't have technically a real job, but he makes his money out of investing in properties.
Right.
And he went through the whole process with me and sat down, gave his time, to go through it all. And I realized that I didn't have the time or the know-how really to do it back then.
Yeah.
And you came up as someone that is obviously in that field and can help me in that area, and that's how I came to see you.
Right.
So that was the best investment. Was the best advice was to go out and seek someone that has been there and done that, and that you respect. And that's kind of the best advice.
No, awesome, mate, and I appreciate the compliment on that as well, mate. I really do. What about the worst piece of investment advice then?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind from a basketball perspective is when people are saying, I've been saying it this whole podcast, but you just got to work hard. You just got to work hard. You just got to grind.
Yeah.
You just got to do the daily grind.
Yeah.
But the one thing with that is people don't normally talk about actually getting the fundamentals down right first.
Yes.
And getting the basics down first. So if you've got a horrible technique with your shooting, and you go out and shoot 1,000 shots a day, but it's with a horrible technique, then, you're just reinforcing bad habits and reinforcing a bad shot.
Good call.
So for me, from a basketball perspective, it's about stripping things back and getting the fundamentals down right, the basics right. Yeah. So when you do put in that hard work, you're actually, you're actually doing it the right way.
Love it. Yeah, that's because we can apply that to anything, mate. That's gold. All right, so the last one of the ambush, what's a personal habit that you believe contributes to your personal success?
For me, number one is meditation.
Yeah.
Just making sure that I get back to that. Sometimes there'll be days or weeks where I stray away from it, and I can see why, because I don't want to deal with what's there. I think as a society we are absolute pros and professionals and experts at that. We don't want to we don't want to deal with what's going on inside ourselves. So we'll just watch Netflix. We'll drink. We'll smoke. We'll go out and do all this stuff because we don't actually want to deal with what's inside.
So true.
But if you make the effort and for me personally, if I make the effort and if I invest in that time of just sitting with what's there and noticing what's there and being aware of my subconscious reactions to things, and it opens up a whole lot of positive things in my life. Yeah,
that's gold, mate. That's really good. Thanks for sharing that, mate. It's because a lot of Aussie blokes in particular, where the rough, the tough, and there's always an external reason. Whereas if we look at the mirror and look hard beyond that, there's often the answer to most of our issues, actually.
Absolutely.
So that's gold, mate. No, awesome. Okay. What's next new and exciting for Luke, mate? So you're studying teaching at the moment. What's happening at the moment that you can share with us?
Yeah, so the plan is to finish my degree this year, and then looking at getting a job at a school next year, in a high school. Yeah. And just high school teaching, and then also get involved in the sports programs of the school that I'm at. I hope to, sort of get involved in that, and kind of go from there.
Sounds awesome, mate. Now, you've shared some real gold with us, mate, that's applicable not only to the basketball court but life generally. If there were those listeners that did want to reach out to you, either in the context of, sort of engaging you in almost a mentoring capacity, either for basketball or I don't know, it may not fit in with your agenda, but how would they do that, mate? How would they get in touch with you?
Yeah, just through social media, I guess. I'm on Facebook. And I'm on Twitter as well. I think I'm at Luke Schenscher or at Luke_Schenscher or something like that on Twitter.
Yeah. There's not too many Luke Schenchers around the place, mate, so it's pretty easy to track down. No, that's been absolute gold. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy day, mate, to share that with us and being so open about the journey. And it's certainly been, what I constantly never ceases to amaze me is that the most successful people, generally the ones who've worked the hardest, and there's not one of them that I've spoken to who hasn't had a whole bunch of trials and tribulations that they've had to continuously work through. But that focus on the end goal and the diligence, the discipline, the patience and the persistence you bring to the task is extremely admirable, mate. And I've always had a lot of time for you, even before we personally met. So really appreciate you sharing that with us, mate, and I know you'll continue to do well in the future.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate it.
Awesome, mate.
Awesome to chat.
Keep up the great work, and we'll talk to you soon, mate.
Okay. Thanks, Bushy.
Thanks, mate. Well, freedom fighters, how good was that? To get a summary of all this investment gold in the show notes, just email me on hello@khgroup.com.au. That's hello@khgroup.com.au. Or check us out at www.bushymartin.com.au/get invested. I look forward to joining you next week for another episode of the Get Invested podcast. So thanks for listening, and as always, dream as if you live forever and live as if you'll die tomorrow.